In Hollywood, every light hides a shadow. Every applause has a silence behind it. This is the story of those who lived between the two. Welcome to Hollywood Biographies, Texas. A late afternoon. The last light of day falls across the old wooden porch, where an elderly man with silver hair sits quietly, gazing toward the wide, open field. No applause now. No cameras, only the sound of wind threading through the trees. That man is Chuck Norris. For decades, he was the face of strength, the indestructible hero on screen, a symbol of integrity and courage that America once revered like a religion. The man who single-handedly defeated enemies, saved the world, and then walked away in silence, as if victory had never truly made him happy. More than half a century has passed since those golden years. Now in his 80s, Chuck Norris has chosen a life far from Hollywood, amid the wild lands of Texas. He spends most of his days with the wife who once nearly died at the hands of modern medicine, and with his grandchildren, who still believe he's the grandpa who could beat Superman. But in truth, he's just an ordinary old man, slower in his steps, quieter in his words, and perhaps more aware than ever that the greatest strength in life isn't in a punch, but in forgiveness. There's a quiet paradox in legends like him. People build monuments to honor them, but they must learn to live with the loneliness of being a legend. Chuck Norris was once America's emblem: discipline, integrity, resilience. But as age set in, he became a symbol of something else: the stillness of a man who has known both triumph and loss. Perhaps every hero must learn how to grow old, not to become weaker, but to understand the value of peace. This story isn't about punches or victories. It's about the man behind the light, the one who once made the world believe in strength, and who now learns to believe in silence. And to understand why Chuck Norris chose to end with quiet rather than glory, we must go back more than 80 years, to a boy born into poverty, with a drunken father, and a mother who believed that faith could save a soul. Before he became a hero on screen, Chuck Norris was just a frightened child, searching for a way to be strong. Ryan, Oklahoma, the summer of 1940, a small town surrounded by cotton fields and red dirt roads stretching endlessly toward the horizon. There, in a shabby wooden house, Carlos Ray Norris was born. No one could have imagined that the crying baby that day would one day become a global action legend. His father, Ray Norris, was a World War II veteran, strong, but shadowed by darkness. The war had stripped him of gentleness, leaving behind a dependence on alcohol and bursts of rage without reason. Each time the door slammed in the middle of the night, little Chuck would curl up in the dark, waiting for his father's drunken storm to pass. His mother, Wilma, believed in God, in patience, and in kindness, rare treasures left amid poverty. When Chuck turned 10, Ray Norris left home. Wilma took on several jobs to raise her 3 children, but what she preserved, more than money, was faith. Chuck would later say, "I didn't have a hero to look up to. I only had my mother, who never gave up." His childhood was a long stretch of days filled with bullying. He was weak, awkward, and painfully shy. Classmates mocked him. "You're not a real American boy." Chuck didn't fight back. He just bit his lip and endured. "I was the kid who wasn't good at anything. I couldn't run fast, couldn't fight well, and nobody believed I'd ever become anything," he recalled years later in an interview. One day, the teacher asked the class what they wanted to be when they grew up. "Doctor," said one. Pilot, said another. Athlete, said a third. Chuck hesitated, then softly said, "I just want my mom to be happy." The whole class burst into laughter. That sentence haunted him for years, like a quiet promise he had to keep. But from those small wounds, another seed began to grow. The will to survive. After his parents divorced when he was 16, Wilma moved her 3 sons from Oklahoma to Kansas, then to Torrance, California. There, Chuck had to start over, in a strange place filled with bright lights, but also deep loneliness. The small-town boy from the Midwest became an easy target for mockery because of his accent and timid manner. Once, after being bullied in front of the schoolyard, Chuck came home crying, saying, "I don't want to go back to school anymore." Wilma simply took his hand and said, "You can't choose where you were born, but you can choose how you rise." That sentence became Chuck Norris's lifelong compass, from the dojo to the movie set. From that moment, he understood. No one was coming to save him. In this world, if you want to survive, you have to learn how to stand on your own. In 1958, at 18, Chuck joined the U.S. Air Force, a decision driven both by poverty and by the desire to prove he could make something of himself. He was stationed at Osan Air Base, South Korea, as an air police officer. It was his first time leaving the United States, and the first time he witnessed a culture where martial arts were not just about fighting, but about shaping the spirit. One afternoon, while patrolling the base, he saw a group of Korean youths practicing martial arts on damp ground. Their kicks were fast, powerful, and precise, mesmerizing the young American soldier. One of them invited him to spar. Chuck smiled, thinking that as a strong American serviceman, he would win easily. Within seconds, he was thrown to the ground. That was the first real taste of defeat, and the first time he felt truly alive. From that day on, he returned to the dojo every evening, training in Tang Soo Do and later Taekwondo. Not to defeat others, but to conquer his own weakness. On rainy nights in Korea, Chuck trained until his knuckles bled. In the silence of the dojo, he found what had always been missing in his life: discipline and faith. Not blind religious faith, but belief in himself. Belief that a frightened boy could grow strong without becoming hateful. Years later, after fame found him, he would still remember that moment, standing outside the base in his worn uniform, looking up at the gray Osan sky, whispering, "This isn't where I came to escape. This is where I came to find myself." In 1962, Chuck returned to America. No longer the timid boy he once was, but a man carrying a new fire within. He opened his first dojo in California, teaching what he had learned in Korea. Not just the techniques, but the philosophy behind them. Discipline doesn't make you cold. It teaches you how to love the right way. The boy who once trembled in a corner, terrified of his father's footsteps, now stood tall in his own dojo, teaching others how to use strength not to destroy, but to protect. In the golden twilight of 1960s California, a new chapter began. No one yet knew that this humble martial arts teacher would soon walk into Hollywood and bring with him the spirit of Tang Soo Do onto the big screen. People see me as strong, but what they don't know is, I learned that strength from every time I fell. California, early 1960s. In a small dojo on the outskirts of Los Angeles, the sharp cry of "Kia" echoes off wooden walls. Amid dozens of students, a tall young man with dark brown hair and steady eyes leads the class. His name is Chuck Norris, newly returned from Korea, carrying a simple dream: to live by what once saved him from darkness: martial arts. At that time, karate was still something foreign in America. But Chuck believed martial arts were more than techniques. They were a way of life. He opened his first school in an old storage shed, taping handwritten flyers to telephone poles. Karate, discipline, respect, self-control. No one believed in him, but he believed. No one knew his name, but he kept training. And from that quiet persistence, an extraordinary journey began to unfold. No one imagined that just a few years later, the bullied boy would become the national karate champion. Over the next few years, Norris threw himself into tournaments across America, from Dallas to Las Vegas. The arenas were cramped, the lights yellow and hot, filled with sweat and shouts and adrenaline. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest fighter, but he was the one who never backed down. Opponents said they could see something strange in his eyes, a kind of total focus, as if he was fighting not only the man in front of him, but the past behind him. One journalist once wrote, "Chuck Norris doesn't fight to win. He fights so he'll never again be that frightened boy." In 1968, he won the U.S. Karate Championship and went on to defend the title 6 consecutive years until 1974. 6 years, 6 times atop the podium, 6 affirmations to the world and to himself that the bullied boy from Oklahoma had truly risen. From an unknown fighter, Chuck Norris became a respected figure in the martial arts community. He opened more than 30 dojos across America. His students weren't just ordinary people. They included Hollywood names like Steve McQueen, Priscilla Presley, and several professional athletes. McQueen, then known as the King of Cool, was especially struck by Chuck's calm presence. After a few training sessions, McQueen made an offhand remark. "You've got something the camera likes. You should try Hollywood." Chuck laughed it off, thinking it was just friendly encouragement. But a few months later, he appeared in The Wrecking Crew, 1969, alongside Dean Martin and Sharon Tate. It was a small role, just a few minutes on screen, but it opened a door he hadn't expected. Then, in 1972, fate came knocking in the most unexpected way. Bruce Lee, his friend and rival in the martial arts world, invited him to Hong Kong to co-star in Way of the Dragon, Meng Long Guojiang. At first, Norris refused. "I'm not an actor." But Lee simply smiled. "You don't need to act. You just need to be yourself." Their duel in the Colosseum in Rome would become one of the most iconic fight scenes in cinema history. Bruce Lee, fast, fluid, like water. Chuck Norris, powerful, disciplined, like cold steel. No background music, no special effects. Just two men, the sound of their breathing, and the reality of their strikes. The world held its breath when that scene played, and from that moment on, Chuck Norris was no longer just a fighter. He had become the embodiment of a new kind of hero. Quiet, principled, and strong. But that fame came with a price. In July 1973, Bruce Lee died suddenly at age 32. The news shocked the world and left Norris in profound emptiness. He later said, "Bruce wasn't just a friend. He was the first person who believed I could do something greater than martial arts." After the funeral, Chuck withdrew from everything. No tournaments, no teaching, no filming. Friends said he seemed lost. Bruce's death made him realize that strength, fame, and victory, all of it, were fragile before life's impermanence. Yet once again, from the bottom, he rose. Not with his fists this time, but with resolve. He returned to cinema, not to chase glory, but to tell a different kind of story. One about a hero who feels pain, believes, and learns to rise again. By the mid-1970s, Chuck Norris was back, no longer as a competitor, but as an action actor shaped by sorrow and perseverance. Films like Breaker, 1977, and Good Guys Wear Black, 1978, introduced him to a global audience and defined a new archetype, the honorable American hero, fighting not for fame, but for justice. In Good Guys Wear Black, there's a scene where he steps out of the smoke, cold, composed, with the American flag waving behind him. It lasts only seconds, yet it convinced audiences that Chuck Norris wasn't playing a hero. He was one. By the late 1970s, Hollywood was changing. Before the rise of Stallone or Schwarzenegger, Chuck Norris was already there, the pioneer. He brought the spirit of Korean martial arts and the discipline of the US military into film, forging a new kind of hero. A man of few words, imperfect, but who never quits. I didn't come to Hollywood to get rich. I came to show kids like me, weak, scared kids, that they can be strong without hate. The stage lights began to shine on the brown-haired man with sharp eyes and a quiet smile. But behind the curtain, he was still that same boy, trying to prove that faith can change destiny. And from there, a new journey began. One where the silver screen hero would soon face the cost of fame and learn how to preserve the human soul within the legend he had become. The 1980s opened with the sound of electric guitars and the heat of explosive film reels. America was entering an era of confidence, muscular, bold, and unapologetically action-driven. And amid that wave, Chuck Norris became an indispensable face. The man who once taught in a small California dojo was now on screens across hundreds of theaters, his eyes sharp as blades, his roundhouse kick a signature. The Octagon, 1980, marked a turning point. It wasn't just an action film. It introduced audiences to Norris's distinct style. Real combat scenes, no stunt doubles, a face that rarely changed expression but carried a quiet philosophy, fighting in silence. From then on, he wasn't merely a martial artist stepping into film. He had become a new cinematic archetype, the moral action hero, stoic, restrained, yet unshakably righteous. When Lone Wolf McQuade premiered in 1983, the image of the lone wolf in a dusty uniform, living on the Texas-Mexico border, sent America into a frenzy. Norris didn't need long speeches. A single look, a slow reload of his gun, and the audience believed justice still existed. In a decade when America longed for heroes, Chuck Norris became the embodiment of one. The unyielding man who carried both the rugged charm of the Old West and the strength of the Reagan era. But behind the camera, his life wasn't nearly as bright. Diane Holcheck, his wife since 1958, from the days when he was just a poor young airman, now lived mostly alone in a quiet house. While Chuck traveled from set to set, Diane stayed home, raising their children and watching his image spread across newspapers, magazine covers, and billboards. In a small interview, she once said softly, "I'm not jealous of any woman. I'm jealous of America, because America gets more of him than I do." Those words were like a small crack, not loud, but slowly widening. Chuck loved his family, but fame swept him away like a storm. Endless filming schedules, hundreds of interviews, promotional tours, and public expectations left little room for real life. In 1984, he entered his most triumphant period with Missing in Action. the story of an American soldier returning to Vietnam to rescue missing comrades. The film became an instant box office hit, grossing over $22 million in North America, nearly 4 times its production budget. Audiences embraced the tale of loyalty and brotherhood, but critics condemned it as political revisionism, turning war into entertainment. The media dubbed Norris the face of the Reagan spirit, a man who never bowed, never feared, always believed in American justice. President Ronald Reagan even watched the film at the White House and reportedly remarked, "If there were more men like Braddock, America would never lose." Canon Films wasted no time turning that quote into a marketing slogan. Magazines plastered images of Chuck Norris beside the U.S. flag, calling him America's last soldier. Standing at the thin line between art and propaganda, Norris chose silence. He simply said, "I don't play a hero. I play a man who doesn't give up." It wasn't a defense. It was a confession from someone who truly believed cinema could help America rediscover its lost pride. A year later came Invasion USA, 1985, where his character, a retired agent, battled a fictional attack on American soil. It was a storm of explosions and gunfire, perfectly reflecting the decade's mindset. A powerful, uncompromising America rising again. Yet behind those explosions was a loneliness few could see. Chuck Norris later admitted he barely had time for his family. Between nonstop shoots, he flew from state to state, living in hotel rooms, eating alone. Under the bright stage lights, he looked invincible. But when the cameras stopped, there remained only a quiet man, with eyes that had seen too many farewells. A close friend recalled that between takes, Norris often sat reading the Bible or jotting down thoughts about life. He called it, "the thing that keeps me grounded in this illusionary world." Perhaps that was how he balanced 2 realities: the public hero America wanted, and the private man struggling not to lose himself. By the late 1980s, Chuck Norris stood at the peak of fame. He was among the highest-paid action stars in Hollywood, standing shoulder to shoulder with Stallone and Schwarzenegger. His image was everywhere, on posters, magazine covers, video games, even military parades. America saw him as the symbol of righteous strength. Hollywood saw him as a profitable brand. Yet amid the flood of praise, he kept his life simple. No alcohol, no parties, no scandals. Every morning, wherever he was, he rose at 5 a.m., trained, and prayed. As if the man on screen and the man off screen differed only in one thing. One fought for a script, the other for the principles he believed in. By the time the curtain closed on the 1980s, Chuck Norris had become part of American pop culture history. The image of the lone soldier stepping out of smoke, gun in hand, eyes cold but heart warm, was etched into the memory of millions. Yet few realized that behind that glory was a soul trying to hold on to a fragment of silence amid the noise. Because perhaps, among all the heroic roles he ever played, the most genuine one was himself, a man who never gave up, whether on the mat, on set, or in life. And as the light of the 1980s began to fade, the hero finally began to feel what few dared to confront. The true cost of fame isn't exhaustion, it's loneliness. In 1988, after more than 30 years together, the marriage between Chuck Norris and Diane Holacek came to an end. No shouting, no courtroom drama, just 2 people quietly worn down after a long road. For 3 decades, she had stood behind every one of his victories, in the ring, in the dojo, and on the film set. But as fame rose, so did the distance between them. When he signed the divorce papers, Chuck believed he could face it like any other battle. But later that same year, a letter arrived, unexpected. The sender was Dinah, 26 years old, who wrote that she believed he might be her biological father. Chuck read it in silence. The past he thought had long been buried stirred again, softly but painfully. He later recalled, "I remembered that woman and that brief, youthful time in my life. Deep in my heart, I knew Gena was telling the truth. When he finally met her, he saw eyes that looked uncannily like his own. No tests, no explanations. Chuck simply embraced the young woman and said, 'I'm sorry you had to grow up not knowing who your father was.' In that moment, the man once considered invincible cried. Not out of regret, but because for the first time, he understood that strength could never reclaim lost time. The event drove him to step away from Hollywood for a while. At the height of his fame, Chuck Norris disappeared from the screen, retreating to his Texas ranch for a quiet life. He avoided the press, refused interviews, and spent his days writing and praying. When studios called, he simply said, "I need to find myself again." His mother, Wilma Norris, was the only one not surprised. She had seen her son survive poverty, loneliness, and now fame itself. During one quiet conversation, she placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You don't have to be strong all the time. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you free." That sentence became a cornerstone of Chuck's spiritual journey. He began writing about forgiveness, about morality and action, about humble faith. Many mornings, people would see him sitting on the porch, reading the Bible under the first light of dawn, sometimes pausing to jot down a line or two. "Martial arts taught me how to fight. Faith taught me when to stop." During this period, Chuck devoted himself to charity work, teaching martial arts to underprivileged children and establishing a foundation to support veterans. He once said, "When I was in the spotlight, I only saw myself. When I stepped out of it, I began to see others." It was one of the rare times Chuck Norris was not a hero, just a man learning to be a father, a son, and a human being in full. By the early 1990s, as Hollywood moved into a new era of action films, he returned, but not as the man of old glory. This time, the light on his face was softer, his voice lower, and in his eyes there was something new: peace. When production began on the television series Walker, Texas Ranger in 1992, he told the director, "I don't just want a fight on screen anymore. I want to talk about justice, faith, and what it means to be a good man." The crew fell silent for a few seconds, because the man who had spoken was no longer the fighter Chuck Norris, but someone who had lived through enough pain to understand that true strength lies not in striking, but in forgiving. In middle age, amid loss and redemption, Chuck Norris found the truest version of himself. No longer America's invincible hero, but a man who had learned both the limits of power and the value of compassion. "I've won many battles," he said once, "but it was only when I learned to bow my head that I finally understood what victory really means." In 1993, amid an era when Hollywood was chasing superheroes and explosive spectacle, Chuck Norris returned, not on the big screen, but on the small screens of millions of American homes. The television series Walker, Texas Ranger premiered its first episode on ABC. No one expected that this simple, even old-fashioned show, in a decade dominated by flashy, high-budget action, would become a national cultural phenomenon. Running for 8 seasons, 203 episodes, and airing in over 100 countries. The character Cordell Walker, the Texas Ranger who acted out of conscience, believed in justice, and lived by faith, quickly became one of television's most beloved figures. Audiences admired him not just for his spinning kicks, but for his integrity, compassion, and unwavering moral belief. Walker did not kill, did not hate, did not boast. He acted quietly, believing in redemption, believing that a man who's lost his way can still find it again. Chuck Norris was not merely the star, he was the soul of the series. Co-producer, writer, martial arts advisor, and above all, the one who infused the show with his Christian faith and moral philosophy. Each episode closed with a small lesson about honesty, forgiveness, or the belief that justice prevails. That was no coincidence. Chuck had told the writers, "I don't want to make another show about violence. I want to tell stories about doing what's right." While Walker was sweeping television ratings, fate brought him an unexpected gift. In 1997, during a promotional photo shoot, Chuck met Gena O'Kelly, a former model and TV host, 23 years his junior. She arrived on set with a natural grace, bright eyes, and a gentle smile. He once said, "When Gena asked me about my mother instead of my fame, I knew she was someone I could trust." They began to talk, and then to love, gently, as if they had known each other long before. In 1998, Chuck and Gena were married in a small ceremony in Texas. No Hollywood lights, no celebrity guests, only family, friends, and a warm prayer echoing across the ranch. For him, it was the beginning of peace after years of repentance. 3 years later, they welcomed twins, Dakota and Dana Lee, when Chuck was already past 60. In an interview afterward, he said, "When I held my children for the first time, I knew I'd been given a second chance to do things right. That little family became his new anchor." Gena often joined him on the Walker set, occasionally appearing in guest roles. When the crew was exhausted after long shooting days, people would see Chuck walk over, hug his wife quietly, and return to filming with a faint smile. The Texas hero on screen in that moment was simply a husband learning how to love and to be grateful. During this time, Chuck founded the Kickstart Foundation, a free martial arts program for underprivileged youth and kids at risk of violence. He said, "I used to be a scared little boy. Martial arts saved me. Now I want to use it to save others." What began as a few small classes grew to reach over 600 schools across America, helping tens of thousands of students develop discipline, confidence, and character. The media started calling him the real-life Walker, and truly, amid the noise of fame, Chuck Norris lived like his character, quietly, steadfastly, compassionately. To children, Walker was a teacher of courage. To adults, he was a reminder of a time when good and evil still had clear lines. Many viewers said, "We watch Walker to believe that justice still exists." With weekly viewership averaging over 10 million, the series became one of the most watched shows of the 1990s. But for Chuck Norris, success wasn't about numbers. It was proof that strength and kindness are not opposites. He had found a way to turn martial arts, once a symbol of combat, into a language of faith. In 2001, when Walker, Texas Ranger ended after 8 continuous seasons, Chuck Norris stepped onto the stage to receive the Golden Boot Award. honoring those who preserved the spirit of the American West. Amid the applause, he didn't speak of victories, box office figures, or records. He simply smiled and said quietly, "Walker is the best part of me, but the real me is still learning how to be kind." The room fell silent, because they all understood. Behind that action star image was a soul that had walked through loss, redemption, and faith restored. When the studio lights went dark, Chuck Norris returned to his Texas ranch, living simply with his wife Gena O'Kelly and their children. He spent his time writing books, teaching martial arts, and continuing his charitable work. For him, Walker, Texas Ranger, was never just a job. It was a mission, a way of saying, a hero doesn't have to live on screen. A true hero is someone who lives by what they believe. From the frightened little boy he once was, to the man who carried America's moral image on his shoulders, Chuck Norris had come full circle. From the strength of the body to the strength of the soul. And in that journey, Walker, Texas Ranger, was more than a hit TV show. It was the rebirth of a legend, a man who finally learned that sometimes protecting others is the surest way to save yourself. In 2001, when Walker, Texas Ranger came to an end, America wasn't just saying goodbye to a television series. It was bidding farewell to an era of classic righteousness. For Chuck Norris, it was also the moment he chose to step away from the light. No grand retirement speech, no headlines, just one quiet morning in Texas. He rose early, as always, read the Bible, and turned to Gena. "I think it's time for me to slow down." He began speaking at churches and schools, sharing lessons about discipline, faith, and family. No longer the action star, Chuck Norris had become a teacher of inner strength. He wrote several books, Against All Odds, The Secret of Inner Strength, and Black Belt Patriotism, each one chronicling his journey of redemption and belief. People said, if his movies taught us how to fight, his books taught us how to live. Then, in 2012, something extraordinary happened. While Chuck had nearly vanished from the public eye, his name suddenly exploded across the internet. Not as an actor, but as a cultural phenomenon. Chuck Norris facts. Short, absurd, half-joking, half-admiring lines spread like wildfire. Chuck Norris doesn't sleep. He waits. There is no theory of evolution, only a list of creatures Chuck Norris allows to exist. Within months, he had become a global meme, an ironic yet affectionate symbol of unstoppable power. The world laughed at Chuck Norris, but what surprised everyone was that he laughed with them. Instead of reacting defensively, he embraced the phenomenon with his trademark humility. If it makes people smile, that's fine by me. I used to fight with my fists. Now I'd rather fight with laughter. The image of the invincible hero was reborn, not through cinema, but through pop culture. From a symbol of physical might, he had become a symbol of optimism, a legend who could smile at himself. But amid the laughter, life struck again, and this time, it was real. In 2017, his wife, Gena O'Kelly, his partner of 2 decades, suddenly collapsed after an MRI procedure. The contrast dye injected into her body caused severe nerve damage, convulsions, and constant pain. Within days, the once healthy woman was bedridden, unable to eat, unable to speak. Doctors were baffled. Chuck was devastated. "I fought my whole life on screen," he said later. But the real fight was keeping her alive. He stopped everything, canceled contracts, withdrew from television and film, and devoted himself entirely to her care. Day and night, he stayed by her bedside, changing medication, reading scripture, holding her hand. For months, Norris barely left the hospital. People would see him sitting alone in the hallway, silent as stone. The hero of America, now just a husband, learning how not to fall apart. When Gena began to recover, he turned his pain into purpose. Together, they filed lawsuits against several pharmaceutical companies, accusing them of producing and distributing toxic MRI contrast agents without proper warnings. Chuck spent millions of dollars, hired lawyers, and led hearings and campaigns, not for money, but for the countless others who might suffer the same way. "I used to fight to win," he said. "Now I fight to protect." After 2017, Chuck Norris nearly vanished from public life. No more movies, no red carpets, no interviews. Even the once famous Chuck Norris facts jokes faded. And this time, he didn't repeat them. All that remained was an aging man with silver hair, living quietly with his wife and children on their Texas ranch, planting trees, reading books, praying every morning. He appeared only at the occasional charity event, still calm, still strong, eyes as bright as ever. When asked if he missed his glory days, he simply smiled. "No, I've lived in the light. Now I just want to live in peace." And perhaps, in that moment, Chuck Norris was no longer the hero on the screen. He was the husband holding his wife's hand through pain, the father teaching his children faith, the man who finally understood that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up to love again. As night falls over the Texas plains, he sits quietly on the porch, looking out over the fields. His hands weathered but steady, no lights, no applause, only the sound of wind and the breath of the woman he vowed to walk beside until the end. "They once called me invincible," he whispers softly. "But it's love that's kept me standing all this time." Texas. Dawn. The first light of day spills across the fields, falling gently on the man standing still beside the wooden fence. He keeps his familiar posture, back straight, hands resting on his hips, eyes fixed on the horizon, though his hair is now completely white. That man is Chuck Norris, 84 years old. No more gunfire, no more arenas, no more blazing lights, only silence. And another kind of strength, deeper and gentler, the strength of loyalty and virtue. Over 6 decades in the spotlight, Chuck Norris has built a legacy almost impossible to replicate. More than 30 films, over 200 episodes of television, 8 books, and dozens of international martial arts awards. He was once a karate champion, an action icon, America's hero, and later, the face of integrity, faith, and conviction. From fighter, actor, and author to devoted husband, each role carved a new line into the portrait of a man who never gave up, on screen or off. In 2020, at the Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony, Chuck Norris walked onto the stage to a long, thunderous applause, a nation's way of saying thank you. He didn't speak about glory or old battles. He simply held the microphone, smiled softly, and said slowly, "Old age hasn't taken my strength. It's just taught me to use it, to love." The hall fell silent. Not because the words were grand, but because they were true. The man who once stunned the world with his kicks now moved it with a sentence as gentle as sunlight. Today, Chuck Norris lives with Gena on their Texas ranch, where he tends to family, writes, and takes part in occasional charity events. Sometimes he appears in short videos, silver-haired, kind-eyed, his voice still calm and steady. He doesn't need to fight anymore. When he speaks, people still feel the quiet power of peace. Younger generations know him through the Chuck Norris facts. Older ones remember him as the emblem of another time, a hero without noise, without pride, yet one who never turned away from what was right. And when the internet jokes fade, when movie memories blur, one simple legacy remains. The belief that the greatest human strength lies not in muscle, but in compassion. Chuck Norris stands alone beneath the Texas sunrise. The light slowly glows across his silver hair, reflecting in the eyes of a man who spent half a century fighting, and now only wants to protect the peace he's found. His voice rises, deep and warm. Every hero grows old, but some heroes, even in silence, still make the world believe in good. The light spreads. His figure grows smaller against the wide sky. A chapter closes, but the legend remains, a quiet reminder that true strength never ages. If a moment in this story made you smile, or remember a quiet hero in your own life, share that memory below. Because sometimes, telling a beautiful story is how we keep goodness alive. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic journeys into the lives behind the fame. This is Hollywood Biographies, the light, the silence, the legacy.